What's going on, guys? It's Rob with CinemaBullyz. I'm with Dave Wilson. Take two. We are going to get into breeding. A lot of people ask me tons of questions about breeding. So I figured might as well ask the man that created his own style and breed of dog from the ground up. Starting with, I believe, pit bulls and Amstaffs. And now he has what we have now, which is the American Bully breed. And it is one of my favorite breeds overall, period. And a lot of views that watch this channel. So we're gonna get into this. Start off with where did you start with this breed? Year and what registry did you start with?
So let me clarify that, because that's something that I think really needs clarification when they say with this breed. So my kennel is Razor's Edge. That was the name of my kennel from when I began. And when I began, my first couple breedings were actually with ADBA registered game dogs. That's where I began, late 80s. Transitioned later on where I got into the American Staffordshire Terrier. And starting in the early 90s, I started to transition and I got into some Amstaffs. So there was a period of time when I actually had some game dogs and some Amstaffs. Still carry the name Razor's Edge. So I dropped the game era and I moved into the Amstaff era. And I started building the look that I wanted within the AKC and the American Staffordshire Terrier, learning about the shows, going to AKC shows, dabbling in some AKC shows. So I got into the American Staffordshire Terrier for a few years. Razor's Edge was an Amstaff line. Then I ran into a situation with a breeder that I had actually purchased 7 dogs from, which were the foundation of what I wanted to build off of. I had changes I wanted to make, but she had a really good foundation of what I wanted, and was unable to get the paperwork. So I had to go to court and do all these things, and in the process I was able to get those dogs registered UKC as American Pit Bull Terriers, because they still accepted the AKC breed as a pit bull. So I got into the UKC world, actually not by choice. I was really pursuing the AKC world in Amstaff. And back in those days, Amstaff was a bigger dog. You know, it was a nice, a dog with some substance to it during that time frame. So when I kind of got forced into the UKC world is when the real Razor's Edge began. And it was Razor's Edge American Pit Bull Terriers. Most of my bloodline was from the Amstaff stuff, because most of my yard was Amstaff. You know, later on, to end that story, I ended up winning the lawsuit and I ended up getting AKC papers years down the road. But anyway, by this point, I was already invested in UKC, competing, showing, building my line. And my idea was to build what I felt was my version of the American Pit Bull Terrier. I always respected the game dogs, but to me, that's a different, you know, that's the true pit bull.
Different animal.
Yeah, different animal. That's the true, the original. We're in the show world now. We're dealing with, it really should have been, in my opinion, a separate breed, because it changed so much, the UKC Pit Bull from the ADBA, the original game dogs. It should have been something different. Anyway, so I was breeding what I liked. And I, back in those days, always had that same philosophy. I like a big head. I like a square dog. I like muscularity. Come from the game world, I love muscle. I loved all that. So I was always pushing the boundaries, trying to create a bulky, you know, as bulky as I could get the dog, but I still was a function person. I mean, I needed my dogs to be able to run, be able to work, be able to do. So that's the foundation behind Razor's Edge, was I was pushing the boundaries to try to create what I felt was the most physically impressive dog, but still had the right temperament that I wanted and everything else that I wanted, functionality that I wanted. I used to hike, I used to take my dogs swimming, do all these things. So, and that's kind of where Razor's Edge began. And, you know, over the years, Razor's Edge became a very unique look. And I believe it's a unique look because I used a lot of Amstaff line, a little bit of my game dog. I had this red-nosed dog named Diablo that had some Patrick and stuff behind him that I used in the line. And then some of the pit bull stuff, I love the watchdog heads and the square. So I had a little bit of stuff that stemmed from that line. So mixing these things together, I came out with a look that was unique. And during that time, the early 90s, mid-90s, if you saw a Razor's Edge dog, you knew that was a Razor's Edge dog. And it didn't matter where you were. People walking down the street said, that's a Razor's Edge dog. You know, and I accomplished my goal. I got to where I had champions, grand champions, top 10 competitors. And in the end, I created Cairo. And when we created Cairo, I was like, this was my vision. This is exactly what I wanted to produce. And Cairo, to me, that was it. I achieved my goal. So in all honesty, I was done with that. Once I got to my goal, I was there. My ex, at that time, we broke up, went separate ways, and I kept some of the dogs. And then, you know, I dabbled still here and there. I had a lot of fan base. I had a lot of clientele. So I still kept breeding for the clientele, but I had already achieved where I wanted to be.
Yeah, your goal.
My goal. And just to shorten the story, basically I was, you know, challenged to go to a show out in California one time by the top people out there, UKC show. saying Razor's Edge can't compete. So, you know, I went back out, competed, beat them all in their own yard, won the California Classics, won all 3 days at the California Classics, best in show, everything. So then I was like, that's it. I've achieved my goal. But while I was out there that day in California, a bunch of people came out to meet me that had Razor's Edge dogs. Tons of people. And there was a lot of my clientele. I don't know if you know Carlton Pratt, and there's a bunch of people that are in it, but they were my clientele during those days. And they all came out to meet me, and he brought Nemesis and, you know, Cassidy Santos, a bunch of these guys in Cali came out. And we had a big crowd of people there at the show. And they were all there, you know, my people, for me, and, you know, people. And they got kicked off. And the UK says, you people can't be here, you guys got to get out of here. But they weren't really, it was a public park. So we moved further down, and they kept hassling and kept hassling. And then, you know, I went and I talked to some of the people there, and they're like, well, Dave, you're okay here. But, you know, these people, they're not, you know, here to enter the show. They're not here to this. I'm like, what do you mean these people this? And like, so I started thinking about it. I was like, I'm okay, but these are people that are here for me. This is, you know, my support team. These are just people with all UKC registered dogs. They're not causing a commotion. No. They're not ringside. They're way out here. And they're supporting the show. They're watching the show. They're learning. They want to get involved. And then one lady's like, well, you're not from California, so you don't understand who's who. I'm like, to me, it was like, those very discriminatory type comments they're making, you know. And it really offended me to the point where I was like, I don't want to be part of this either. You know, like if they're not welcome here, I don't want to be part of this. And then I left with a sour taste. Even though I won everything, that really put a bad taste in my mouth, you know. And I didn't agree with that. So fast forward a little bit, I went to another show one time. I was out there visiting things, and the same thing happened. And I got to the point where and the police were calling people, you know, for being there. And they were in the park, they were way off in the distance. Show was over here, they're over here. So, and that time was a lot of Gotti guys that I had just started meeting them. And, you know, so I just got to the point where I'm not supporting this anymore. I don't want to be part of this. And then the UKC changed their standards. So they went from favoring a dog with some substance in head to a more terrier style dog. And I would love to get into this real quick if you don't mind. Because just so you know, a lot of people preach breed club. There's a big movement in our community right now. Breed club. Yeah, see, yeah. The worst thing ever. That is the demise of breeds. The demise of breeds. That was the demise of the pit bull in the UK. See, the problem with that is it's just select people, and whatever their fad is of the time or their thing, it changes. And then when those people get tired of being that committee, new people come on and it changes. That's what happened. And the UKC, in my opinion, messed up big because they were started for the American Pit Bull Terrier. That's why they were formed. Then later, years down the road, they subbed that out to the National American Pit Bull Terrier Association Breed Club. That is the demise. That's when the pit bull went downhill, killed it. The UKC should have stuck to their own because they started for the pit bull. They should have dictated that breed because they were the foundation registry for that breed. Once they subbed it out to a breed club, killed it. So anyway, that breed club changed the standard. We got out of it, you know. And that's kind of what set us in our own world. And at that time, I had a group we formed called the Elite Edge, a lot of breeders from around all over, from California all over. And we didn't have Facebook and all those things that day, so we had what they called the MSN board. And on the MSN board, we created the Elite Edge board. And on the Elite Edge board, the community came. And this was the hub of the dog world for the bully world. We weren't calling it the bully. We were all still breeding pit bulls, but bullier styles. And then we would start having cookouts. A guy in California, Larry, would have his little cookout type shows and things. Byron had one in Texas. You know, we would have them here in Virginia. So all of us Razor's Edge guys and Gotti guys were all going to these events together, but we weren't calling it anything. We didn't have any real name to it or anything, you know. And the Lead Edge guys we would be the same community with the Gotti guys, but very separate because Elite Edge guys were all based on Razor's Edge, which truly was pit bull in Amsterdam. Gotti was something different, and it was pit bull with, you know, bulldog characteristics, you know. Bigger dogs though. You know, we were a little smaller, they were a little bit bigger. So we all kind of were one community, but we all for many years stayed separate. Like the Elite Edge guys wouldn't breed the Gotti dogs weren't breeding anything else. But we all coexisted as one, you know. Finally on the Elite Edge board one day, you know, we're talking, we put up this post and said, look, we got to come up with our own name and our own thing. We did a whole poll on there and everybody had all these names. I put up American Bully. I said, I like this one. In the end, people voted and the Elite said, hey, let's go with American Bully. So at that point, I said, you know what we're going to do? Now we got it. We're going to write our standards. We're going to start a registry. So I got with Lou Manipon, who's a judge for us now. And together, me and I brought in my partner, Cruz, and he brought in his partner, which is the guy who owns Bullypedia, Ram's brother at the time. And the four of us got together and we created the ABKC. And me and Lou sat down and wrote the standards for the American Bully, and that is what started the ABKC, the American Bully. And at that point, I reached out to Richard Barajas with Guideline. I said, hey, this is what we're doing. Do you want to be involved? He said, you know what? I want my dogs to be involved in that as well. So really, between Richard Barajas and the guiding crew there and the Elite Edge, that together formed the base of the American Bully. And that's why you have a couple varieties and things like that, you know. But that formed the base of it. When that day came, I was no longer Razor's Edge pit bull breeder. Now, I'm Razor's Edge American Bully breeder. Right, and the American Bully eventually meshed. Those lines eventually meshed and became what the American Bully is. Even though they're separated for many years, eventually they meshed, and that became the American Bully. There's a kennel out there called Cutthroat Kennels. To me, that's the original American Bully breeder, because they were the first to cross Gotti and Edge, and they came out dogs like Corrupt, and there's a bunch of them that had. Yeah, but that was done by Cutthroat Kennels. Those, to me, are the true breeders of the American Bully, because they were the true to cross the two lines and put it together.
I don't mean to cut you off, but Michaelin's blood. Michaelin, when did that come into play?
Michaelin was around during that time, and he dabbled in and out of what we were doing.
Did he get involved? He was more involved with the Gotti side, or was he more?
No, he had a
involved
good blend. Michaelin had a good blend of Edge and Gotti, and he had something else in there too. But good blend. He had bigger dogs. He dabbled. Me and Mike were friends for years. He dabbled in and out of it, but Mike had a select following. That was him, and eventually that following pulled itself into the American Bully.
Gotcha.
You know. Gene pool, but him himself, he would dabble back and forth and stuff. But yeah, I mean, but it was all based on the same. So you can look at Michaelin, and you know, as being another foundation in there, because yes, but again, it was a lot of that was based on Edge and Gotti too. So but yeah, you know, he was one of the pioneers, breeders at the time. Yeah, but when I'm talking about Cutthroat was the first that I think really crossed that boundary.
Gotcha.
And so then when I became a breeder again of that, I had to start producing that. So that's when I was partnered with Cruz, and we had Razor's Edge Bow Wow. And those dogs we were producing at that time.
I got that one with those pets.
You see, that's more the our foundation, Razor's Edge Foundation, building the American Bully. So I became that breeder then of an American Bully. So when you look at Razor's Edge, people always think like this. There's generations of Razor's Edge, and it went through changes. My kennel name carried on with me, but the type of dog I bred, really in essence, I bred different breeds. And the pit bull era eventually ended. Because even though that was foundation into our American Bully, now we're breeding an American Bully. We're no longer breeding a pit bull. So Razor's Edge, the American Pit Bull Terrier, ended at one point in time, but it flowed into the American Bully because a lot of my foundation was from that. But the American Bully is a blend of all those things.
So now back to your breeding. So some breeding questions. Since you created everything, were you a firm believer in line breeding, inbreeding, stacking traits, or blending different bloodlines? What was your take on creating everything that you did?
Everything you just said, with the exception of inbreeding. Inbreeding as a breeder if you're going to be a breeder of a bloodline, once you've created a bloodline, it's necessary to do inbreeding, not for, I hate to say it this way, but it's necessary to understand your line. You need to know what strong traits, good and bad, are in your line. So all real breeders that create bloodlines at some point in time will inbreed, not for the purpose of making a different dog, but for the purpose of learning what they have. And that's just something that's a sad truth too. Inbreeding is a necessary thing to learn your line, good and bad. So I was always what you call inbreeding, is what I'm talking about. Line breeding is how you breed. So line breeding is the way breeders breed, and that's how you continue to keep your traits going. When you're line breeding, though, I've always told people every 4 5 generations, sometimes 3 to 4, you have to bring something in to freshen your line, or line breeding can become inbreeding.
Yes.
So you have to bring something in. So I was always a trait shopper. That's the best way to describe it.
I like that.
And it's like people talk about genotype and phenotype. Both are necessary. First is on the look of the dog, because you got to find the trait. So that's your first step. Then you go back into the pedigree to figure out where that trait came from, so you know how to pull it or not pull it. So both those things are equally important. It's just that you look for the look first, and then you figure out where it comes from, the pedigree. So I'm a trait shopper. So I have my line, but every 4 to 5 generations, I'll start looking for like what I wanted to tweak. So I would trait shop. If I found a line that was carrying a better head, or a better this, I will say I used gaff at one point, because what I noticed in my line, I didn't get the rear muscularity. I had good angulation, but I lacked that muscularity. So I pulled in some gaff stuff, which gave me great rears. But then I got, the heads got a little smaller in the front, started to get a little. So then, I had to take that stuff and go right back to the original stuff to clean it back up. And then a couple more generations, I was able to continue to keep the rears, but keep all the other traits I like. And that's how you actually breed. Okay. You line breed, and you pop in, you pop out for traits, but make sure they work. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you're a breeder and you think like this is going to be great, and you put it in there like, whoa, that was a mistake. And then you got to realize at that point, I wasted my time. And it's unfortunate when you're a breeder, but we're talking breeding bloodline. Yeah. Not just putting two dogs together. Well, and this is a generational process. So, yes, line breeding is how you continue a line.
Yeah. So line breeding, or whatever you're stacking traits, but line breeding. So basically, he's saying you need to have minimum of 5 to 10 years in this to really get your product. It's when you're starting from scratch.
Well, here's the thing. So instead of putting a time frame on it, this is what you have to tell people. To be a breeder of a bloodline, you have to have something unique. Something like we talked about breed type before. That applies to bloodlines, in my opinion, because it needs to be unique. Like I said, you would walk down the street, people say that's a Razor's Edge dog, because it had something that was unique to Razor's Edge. So first is, as a breeder, you got to create something that is uniquely yours, that has some characteristic that you can identify and say, this is unique trait. Then you have to show that generational. You have to be able to have a few generations of dogs that carry that have that look, that have, on and on. Because one hit wonder is nothing. That's not a bloodline. Yeah. You need 3 or 4 generations where when you come to the yard, you're like, damn, again. By the time you hit that fifth generation, these things are all looking like something the same. Now you're a breeder. Yeah. Now you're a breeder. That's a bloodline.
So, now, when you consistently line breed, or if you inbreed, decide to, whatever the case is, when your dogs start getting smaller in size, what do you think what's happening with that?
That's a common trait in the American Bully that happens when genes get too tight. It starts to reduce, and at that point you have to constantly you got to pull something in to stop, because it's going to get worse each generation. And not only that, but when you start to see that, you'll start to see that the flaws will get stronger and stronger too. So when you're starting to get dogs that are getting smaller, or you're losing something, you realize, okay, I've gone too far now. Now I got to bring something back in to correct that. And that's typical in the American Bully. In my line, especially, that was a trait that Little Roe, I don't know if you remember Little Roe, but Little Roe was actually a learning experience and an accident, because I bred 2 dogs, Cairo to Viagra, who had the same mother, and big dogs. And the next generation got smaller. Yeah. And that doubling up on the mother, Paddington, I realized the dogs are getting more compact. And Roe was the original pocket, but not pocket, if that makes sense. He wasn't a true pocket of today, but he was that first little dog that just made everybody like, wow, that's something. A little dog with big features, Yeah. And Paco, who everybody knows, Paco was his next generation, and as a process was still breeding on that same trait that got smaller. Paco was the original true pocket. And then Marco continued to breed that way, and you saw the dogs got smaller, but you also started seeing a lot of other issues, bites and tails and things like that, because you need to, put something else in there at some point to clear all that stuff up. And, it's not the best way to breed that way, breeding for smaller. And if you are, then you've got to find ways to bring other dogs in that aren't going to affect the height, but are still going to clean the blood up where you're not getting all the other issues.
So there was some breeding advice and some background, or most of Dave Wilson's background from the beginning. I hope this helped you guys out hearing it from the man that created it, not just me, that I post whatever I post on my channel regarding the breeding. He's done it all. He's seen it all. He's been around for a long time. Respect this man. Understand. Everyone got something to say about somebody. Why don't you go do something and make your name known like this guy did across the world? All right? And I hope this helped you guys out. Take three's next.